A white police officer spits on a black woman, assuming she's just another nobody causing trouble outside the courthouse. But when she wipes her face, steps into the building, and takes the podium, the room falls into stunned silence. Because she's not just anybody. She's the new district attorney. And she's about to turn their entire world upside down. It was just after 8 a.m., and the courthouse steps gleamed under the rising sun, still slick from the night's rain. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet concrete and old brick. Jordan Matthews stood quietly near the entrance, hands tucked into the pockets of her navy blazer. Her jeans were worn but clean, her sneakers scuffed from long days on her feet. She looked out across the square, watching the city wake up. From the corner of her eye, she noticed him. Officer Markson, swaggering toward her like he owned the sidewalk. His patrol uniform was crisp, but the lazy slouch in his walk betrayed his arrogance. A couple of officers lounging by the door snickered as they watched him approach, coffee cups in hand. "You lost, sweetheart," Markson called out, his voice dripping with mock concern. "This ain't no hangout spot. Move along." Jordan met his gaze calmly, saying nothing. She could see it in his eyes, the quick judgment, the instant dismissal. To him, she was just another face that didn't belong here. When she didn't immediately flinch or apologize, his smirk deepened. Without warning, he leaned forward and spit directly at her feet. A fleck of saliva caught her ankle, warm and disgusting. The other officers erupted into low, cruel laughter, their voices cutting through the morning air like knives. "Don't make me say it twice," Markson sneered. "Get gone." Jordan stood still for a heartbeat longer, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. Every instinct screamed to react, to speak, to set the record straight. But instead, she simply pulled a white handkerchief from her pocket and wiped the spit from her leg, slow and deliberate. Her movements were measured, her face an unreadable mask. Without a word, she turned and walked past him, up the courthouse steps. The laughter faded behind her, but she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Inside the courthouse lobby, the cool air greeted her like a second skin. Marble floors stretched out in front of her, and the grand staircase rose proudly at the center. Jordan paused at the base of it, adjusting the strap of the leather bag slung over her shoulder. She took a breath, steadying herself. Today was not the day for anger. Today was the day everything changed. And by the time the morning was over, every single person who had laughed would know exactly who she was. The briefing room buzzed with the easy arrogance of familiarity. Officers lounged in chairs, boots propped up on tables, laughter bouncing off the cinderblock walls. Someone cranked open a window to let in the sticky morning air, but it did little to clear the stale scent of sweat and burned coffee that hung over the room. At the back, Officer Markson leaned against a file cabinet, arms crossed over his chest, a cocky grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. He was mid-story, holding court for a small cluster of officers who ate up every word. "She looked at me like she thought she belonged here," he said, chuckling. "Had to remind her this is a courthouse, not a soup kitchen." Laughter erupted around him, some loud and genuine, others more cautious, the kind of laughter people gave when they knew better, but didn't dare say it out loud. Markson shrugged, basking in the attention. "Told her to get gone. Figured she'd get the message when I helped it along a little." He mimed spitting on the floor, earning a few more snickers. Across the room, a couple of younger officers exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Speaking up wasn't the way things were done here. You stayed in your lane. You kept your head down. The door to the room creaked open and a clerk poked her head inside. "Everyone, take your seats. The district attorney will be joining us in a few minutes." The announcement barely made a ripple. Someone tossed a balled-up napkin across the room. Another officer crumpled his empty coffee cup and lobbed it toward a trash can, missing by a foot. Markson straightened his tie, still smirking. "New DA better know how things work around here," he muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Otherwise, she's gonna have a real rough first day." More chuckles. A few heads turned toward the front of the room as officers lazily settled into their seats, waiting for another round of speeches they didn't expect to care about. They were used to figureheads, people who came and went, delivering empty promises about change before fading into the background. No one was ready for what was coming, and certainly not Officer Markson, who still wore the smug satisfaction of a man who thought he had already won. The courtroom was a low murmur of chatter, shoes scuffing against tile, papers rustling as people shifted in their seats. Uniforms, suits, and badges dotted the crowd, all gathered for the morning's official business. A few officers leaned back in their chairs, arms folded, the edges of boredom already creeping onto their faces. Another ceremony, another speech, another person who wouldn't last. At the front, a polished wooden podium stood empty, a small county seal glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. A clerk adjusted the microphone, her movements brisk and practiced, then stepped aside. Near the back, Officer Markson lounged with an easy arrogance, one arm slung over the back of a chair. He chuckled under his breath, swapping jokes with the officer beside him, utterly unaware of the noose tightening around him. The side door creaked open. Every head turned. Jordan Matthews stepped into the room, her stride measured, unhurried. The same navy blazer, the same scuffed sneakers. Her head held high, eyes scanning the crowd with a calm, unreadable gaze. For a split second, the room didn't quite catch up to what they were seeing, and then it did. A ripple moved through the air like an electric shock. Gasps, sharp whispers, shifting bodies. Markson sat up straighter, confusion flashing across his face. His mouth opened slightly, the color draining from his cheeks as realization slammed into him like a freight train. Jordan reached the podium and set a leather folder neatly atop it. She adjusted the microphone with a steady hand, her fingers betraying no hint of nerves. When she spoke, her voice was clear, steady, and cold enough to slice through steel. "My name," she said, her eyes sweeping across the silent, stunned faces, "is Jordan Matthews." She let the weight of her words hang in the air. "As of today," she continued, "I am your new district attorney." You could have heard a pin drop. Markson sat frozen, every muscle in his body locked in place. His earlier bravado evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, sinking pit in his gut. He felt every pair of eyes darting between him and the woman at the podium, the woman he had spat on less than an hour ago. Jordan's gaze flickered across the room once more, pausing just long enough to meet his. She smiled then, not with kindness, but with a quiet, devastating certainty. And in that moment, Officer Markson realized the world he knew was about to come crashing down around him. Jordan rested her hands lightly on the sides of the podium, letting the silence stretch just a second longer than comfortable. No one moved. No one dared. The weight of her presence filled every inch of the courtroom, pressing down on the rows of uniforms and tailored suits. "I came here this morning," she began, her voice measured, every syllable deliberate. "Not in my title, not in my robe, not with my name stitched into a gold plaque." She glanced around the room, her gaze slow and steady. "I came here simply as a citizen." A few chairs creaked as officers shifted uneasily. A cough echoed from the back and was quickly stifled. "And in those few minutes," she continued, her voice sharpening, "I was treated exactly how too many people are treated by the very system meant to protect them." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word struck like a hammer. "There is a sickness here," Jordan said, her hand tapping once on the wood. "A culture of disrespect, of contempt, of believing that if someone doesn't look the way you expect, if they don't fit the mold you've constructed in your mind, then they are less." Markson's jaw twitched, his eyes fixed on a spot somewhere near his boots. Jordan pressed on, each word slicing the room open wider. "This isn't just about one officer. It's not just about one incident. It's about a rot that has been allowed to spread. Quietly. Comfortably. Protected by silence and laughter and looking the other way." She paused, letting her words settle into the cracks of the room, letting them stain. "If I, standing here today as your district attorney, can be treated with open disdain on the steps of this very building," she said, her tone cooling to something almost icy, "then what do you think happens to the mother coming here to fight for custody of her child? To the teenager showing up for court-ordered counseling? To the man wrongly accused who already knows no one will believe his story. A slow, suffocating tension wrapped around the room, squeezing tighter with every breath. "I saw you," Jordan said quietly. "All of you." She wasn't just speaking to Markson anymore. She was speaking to every badge, every suit, every bystander who ever thought doing nothing was harmless. "And now you see me." Her eyes burned into the crowd, daring anyone to look away. No one did. "And let me make this clear," she finished, her voice dropping to a final, ringing note. "That culture, your culture, changes today. No applause, no stirring music. Just the hard, heavy silence of a reckoning too long overdue." Jordan shifted her stance slightly, one hand resting lightly on the podium, the other sliding the leather folder open in front of her. Papers inside remained untouched. She didn't need notes for this. Her eyes scanned the room again, slower this time, searching, until they landed exactly where everyone knew they would. On Officer Markson. He tried to look bored, tried to lean back in his chair with that same careless smirk he wore earlier. But his hands gave him away, knuckles white against the armrests. Jordan locked eyes with him, and didn't look away. "This morning," she said, her voice slicing through the courtroom like a blade, "one of your officers chose to spit on a citizen without provocation, without reason, without a second thought." A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere near the back. No one laughed now. "That officer," Jordan continued, still holding Markson's gaze, "acted not out of duty or principle, but out of contempt, out of bias, out of a dangerous belief that they had the right to humiliate someone simply because they could." Markson's smirk faltered. His eyes flickered, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Jordan let the silence stretch, giving every person in the room a front-row seat to the shame now blooming across his face. "And that," she said, her voice tightening, "is exactly why trust between this community and law enforcement has crumbled. Not because of policies, not because of politics, but because of small moments like this, repeated over and over, until dignity is ground into dust." No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. Jordan finally broke eye contact, turning her attention back to the room as a whole. "Effective immediately," she said. "An internal investigation into officer conduct is underway. Every complaint, every accusation that's been brushed aside will be reviewed." A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd. "And as for this morning's incident," she continued, her voice clear and merciless, "Officer Markson is suspended pending the outcome of that investigation." Markson sat rigid, his face a study in disbelief and rage. But he said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Jordan closed the folder softly, almost gently, as if sealing something permanent inside. "Change is not optional," she said, her final words hanging heavy over the room. "It's happening whether you welcome it or not." She stepped back from the podium, her posture steady, her face unreadable. The courtroom remained frozen, every person suddenly very aware that the world they had known up until this morning had already begun to collapse around them. The meeting ended, but no one moved right away. It was as if the air itself had thickened, trapping everyone in their seats. Slowly, almost reluctantly, officers and staff began to trickle out of the courtroom, their footsteps heavy, their conversations hushed. Officer Markson shoved his chair back with a screech, storming out with a stiff jaw and clenched fists. A few others followed, heads down, avoiding eye contact, anger and humiliation written all over their faces. But not everyone left in a cloud of resentment. Near the side of the room, a young officer lingered, badge still new enough to shine under the harsh lights. He glanced around nervously before approaching Jordan, who stood gathering her papers with steady hands. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. I'm glad you said what you said." Jordan looked up, meeting his gaze. He flushed under the weight of it, but didn't back down. "I've seen it too," he added. "Been scared to say anything." Jordan nodded once, firm and reassuring. No promises, no platitudes, just acknowledgement. As the day wore on, whispers circulated through the courthouse halls. Some muttered about overreach, about an outsider trying to break something she didn't understand. But others, quieter at first, spoke about the possibility of something better. Marginalized staff, who had spent years swallowing insults and side comments like bitter pills, began stopping by Jordan's office. Some came under the pretense of delivering files or asking for signatures. Others came simply to stand in the doorway for a moment, offering a silent nod of respect before slipping away. It wasn't a wave yet. It was barely even a ripple. But it was movement. Jordan spent the next days walking the halls, attending meetings, sitting in on hearings. Always visible. Always steady. She listened more than she spoke. She watched how people interacted when they thought no one important was paying attention. The old culture didn't break overnight. It fought back in small, ugly ways. A careless joke muttered just loud enough to hear, a sideways glance meant to sting. But Jordan didn't flinch. She didn't shout. She didn't crumble. She simply kept showing up. A new poster appeared on the staff bulletin board by the end of the week. Respect is not a suggestion. It's the minimum. No one claimed to have put it up. Jordan didn't ask. Real change, she knew, wasn't about grand speeches or sudden revolutions. It was about moments like this, the quiet ones, where courage slowly started to outrun fear. And she was just getting started. The courthouse steps looked different now. Not because the stone was any cleaner, or the cracks in the sidewalk any less deep. It was something harder to see, but impossible to miss. A weight had lifted. Slowly, stubbornly, but it had lifted. Jordan Matthews stood at the top of the steps, the early morning sun warming the shoulders of her tailored blazer. Below her, officers gathered for the start of another day. Their uniforms were the same. Their faces were not. There were new recruits now. Fresh faces trained under a different standard, taught that power wasn't a weapon, but a responsibility. Officers who had once scoffed at the idea of reform now sat through bias training sessions, some grudgingly, some earnestly. Leadership at the department had shifted too. A few key figures were gone, some resigning under pressure, others shown the door after long overdue investigations concluded. Trust from the public was coming back, inch by inch. It was in the way community members lingered a little longer at courthouse events, the way complaints had dropped not because of fear, but because real respect was finally being shown. Small victories. Hard-won ones. Jordan looked out across the square, remembering the first morning she had stood here. A nobody to them. A target. She remembered the spit, the laughter, the cold dismissal in their eyes. And she remembered how badly she had wanted to burn it all down right then and there. But she hadn't. She had chosen something harder. A few officers passed her on their way inside, offering nods, not stiff, not forced, but real. One young woman, badge gleaming, paused at the top step. "Morning, D.A. Matthews," she said with a small smile. Jordan returned it, a slow warmth blooming in her chest. "Morning." As the woman disappeared inside, Jordan let her gaze linger on the old brass courthouse doors. They still creaked when they opened. The floors inside still needed polishing. Some things she knew would never be perfect. The fight wasn't over. It probably never would be. There would always be another Markson waiting in the wings, another battle that needed fighting. But there was something here now that hadn't been before. A fire. A refusal to look the other way. A belief that dignity wasn't something you earned with a title or a uniform. It was something every human being deserved the moment they walked through those doors. Jordan tucked her hands into her pockets, the morning breeze tugging at the edge of her blazer. This place would never be easy. But for the first time, it felt like it might just be worth it.